Hello and welcome to the new season of the Drawn and Redrawn, the Making of India's Internal Boundaries podcast. This is a part of a larger India State Stories project that explores the evolution of India's political and administrative boundaries. This project is an undertaking by the Centre for Legislative Education and Research at Flame University in Pune. In this new season, we embark on a journey through the fascinating histories and narratives of each Indian state and union territories, exploring the pivotal events, influential personalities, and societal transformations that have shaped the subcontinent. In the 19th episode, we explore the history of formation of the northeastern state of Meghalaya. This episode is based on a corresponding article written by our team at India State Stories. These articles have been converted to audio conversations with the help of Google's Notebook LM. You can find the relevant article link in the show notes. Now, let's dive into the conversation.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are looking at the Northeast today, specifically the abode of clouds, Meghalaya. And, going through the research you've pulled, I want to start with a contrast.
Usually, when we look at the formation of Indian states in the, say, 50s and 60s, the narrative is, well, it's volatile. It's linguistic riots, hunger strikes, burning buses. But the data on Meghalaya suggests something quieter.
It is quieter, but deceptively so. If you look at the formation of Andhra or Maharashtra, it was explosive.
Right.
Meghalaya is different. The sources, they describe it as a gradual yet steady rise. It wasn't about insurgency. It was really a masterclass in constitutional negotiation.
That distinction is really important. We're going to see legal experiments here, like the concept of a sub-state that the Indian government hasn't really tried before or since.
It is extremely rare.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this deep dive is so relevant. We often view statehood as a binary switch. You're either a state or you're not. But Meghalaya's history, it really shows us the gray areas.
That's the part that jumped out at me, this whole idea of a state within a state. It sounds like a bureaucratic paradox. But before we unravel that, let's establish the baseline. We are looking at documents covering the Garo, Khasi, and Jaintia Hills. Where does the story actually begin?
We have to start at the transition of power, 1947.
Yeah.
Geographically, you have to visualize these three distinct hill ranges acting as a watershed, sort of, between the Brahmaputra Valley in the north and the plains of Bengal in the south.
Okay.
And under the British, these weren't standard provinces. They were classified as excluded areas.
I see that term in the notes. Excluded implies they were left alone, but in a colonial context, that usually means something more like quarantines.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
The British drew a line around these hills. They didn't enforce the standard laws of the Bengal Presidency or Assam Plains here. They recognized that the customary laws, the land rights, the social structures here were distinct. So when 1947 hits, the fear among the tribal leaders, the Khasis, the Garos, is that integration into a democratic India might mean being swallowed by the majority culture of the plains.
So it wasn't just about borders, it was about the survival of an entire identity. And looking at the timeline, things move fast. Between December 1947 and mid-1948, the 25 Khasi princely states signed the Instrument of Accession.
Yes, and that was the critical first step. They agreed to join India, but they needed a guarantee that they wouldn't just become generic districts of Assam. They wanted to maintain that distinct status they had held for decades.
And this is where the Borderloy Committee comes in, and specifically a man named Reverend J.J. Enkles Roy. He seems to be the linchpin here.
Reverend Enkles Roy is absolutely central to this narrative. He was a Khasi leader, and crucially, he was a member of the Constituent Assembly, so he understood the legal machinery.
He knew how the system worked.
Exactly. He argued that you cannot govern these hills from the plains without specific protections. He was part of the Borderloy Committee formed in 1948, and he really pushed for a constitutional firewall.
That firewall became the Sixth Schedule. We hear about the Sixth Schedule constantly in modern news regarding Ladakh or other tribal areas. But if you had to explain it to someone in 1950, what did it actually grant them?
Well, think of it as a constitution within the Constitution. The Sixth Schedule created autonomous district councils.
Okay.
It meant that while the map said Assam, the reality on the ground was that these councils controlled the land, the forests, and the local customs. The state government in Assam couldn't just override them.
So in 1950, when the Republic is formed, the Garo Hills and the United Khasi Jaintia Hills are technically districts of Assam, but they have this special force field around them.
Exactly. The Khasi and Jaintia areas were merged into one district, and the Garo Hills was another. Both were autonomous districts. And for about a decade, that seemed to work. It was a federal compromise.
Until the language issue blew it up.
Language is almost always the detonator in Indian state politics.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting. In 1960, the Assam state government moved to make Assamese the sole official language of the state.
And you have to understand the implication of that. For a Khasi or Garo speaker or any of the hill tribes, this wasn't just administrative inconvenience. It signaled that eventually they would be culturally assimilated.
An existential threat.
A huge one.
Yeah.
And this fear united the tribes. Before this, the Garos and Khasis operated somewhat separately. The language issue forced them to form a unified front, the All-Party Hill Leaders Conference, or APHLC.
And their demand shifted from protect our rights to give us our own state.
Yes. The APHLC wasn't just a political party, it was a platform.
Yeah.
They went to New Delhi to Prime Minister Nehru and said, look, we cannot stay in Assam. Now, Nehru was very resistant to breaking up Assam. He believed large states were economically more viable and, better for national integration.
So he countered with a proposal that is honestly one of the weirdest footnotes in Indian constitutional history. He offered them the Scottish pattern. I had to reread the notes on this. What on earth is the Scottish pattern in the context of 1960s Northeast India?
It does sound strange, doesn't it? He wasn't suggesting they wear kilts, obviously. He was looking at the relationship between Scotland and the UK Parliament as a sort of model for federalism.
How would that even work on the ground?
Essentially, the Hill leaders would sit in the Assam Assembly, but they would form a separate committee that had exclusive power over the Hill areas.
It's like a mini legislature inside the main one.
Pretty much. They would have separate budgets, separate ministers, and specific legislative powers. It was an attempt to create a legislature inside a legislature.
That sounds incredibly complex. Did the APHLC go for it?
Initially, no. They rejected it. They wanted a separate state, plain and simple. But negotiation is a long game. Eventually, they accepted the offer, sort of, to give it a try. They contested the 1962 general elections and won a resounding victory in the Hill areas on this platform.
So they have the mandate. They are ready to push for this Scottish pattern or even more. But then history intervenes.
The Sino-Indian War of 1962.
Yeah, everything stops.
Everything stops. With a war on the border, internal reorganization just took a backseat. National security was the only priority. But once the dust settled, the demand came right back. So the government set up the Pataskar Commission in 1966 to look into it again.
And did the Pataskar Commission say, okay, let's give them a state?
Quite the opposite. The Pataskar Commission essentially recommended maintaining the status quo, just sticking with the 6th Schedule autonomy.
Ouch. That must have felt like a massive setback to the APHLC.
It was. They rejected the report immediately. In fact, they were so disillusioned that they decided to boycott the 1967 elections entirely. The trust was it was broken.
This feels like the moment where, in other stories, things turn violent. You have a unified group, their demands are ignored, commissions are siding against them. But this is where the Meghalaya difference kicks in.
That's right. We enter the era of Indira Gandhi, who became prime minister in 1966. She realized that the Scottish pattern wasn't enough, but she also wasn't ready to fully carve up Assam yet. She promised a federal reorganization, a plan where regions would have equal status.
So the APHLC decides to test this. Despite the boycott in '67, they eventually prove their dominance. In the elections they did contest later, they won all the seats in the Garo and united Khasi Jaintia Hills. But the Assam Congress wouldn't back down.
No, they wouldn't. And here's the critical detail. When the Assam government refused to yield, the APHLC members didn't pick up guns. They resigned their assembly seats.
All of them.
All of them. And they launched a non-violent satyagraha.
A satyagraha, in the late 60s, echoing the freedom struggle.
It emphasized moral pressure over physical force. And it worked. It forced the central government to come up with a solution that was, frankly, revolutionary.
This brings us to December 29th, 1969, the Assam Reorganization Meghalaya Act. This is the aha moment regarding that state within a state concept.
Yes, this act created an autonomous state.
Wait, clarify that. Not an autonomous district like before.
No, this was different. This was an autonomous state within the state of Assam.
My head is spinning a bit. A state within a state.
It's a very rare tier in India's structure. Best analogy, and one used at the time, was looking at the autonomous republics in the former USSR. Meghalaya had its own legislature, its own council of ministers, and powers over almost everything except a few key subjects, like law and order, which remained with Assam.
That is wild. So you have Assam, and inside Assam you have this sub-state of Meghalaya.
Precisely. And to make it even more unique, Shillong served as the capital for both.
For both at the same time.
At the same time. Imagine living in Shillong. You are the capital of Assam, but you're also the capital of this new autonomous state of Meghalaya.
Talk about a bureaucratic nightmare, but also a fascinating compromise. It gave them the feeling of statehood without fully severing the link.
It was a transitional structure. It comprised the Garo Hills district and the United Khasi Jaintia Hills district. It allowed the local leadership to, prove they could govern.
But transitional is the key word there. It wasn't the end goal, was it?
No. The demand for full statehood never really went away. The sub-state arrangement was a bit clunky in practice. You can imagine the friction when the police are controlled by one government and, say, the village administration by another. And by 1971, the geopolitical map of the Northeast was being redrawn entirely.
The Northeastern Areas Reorganization Act of 1971, this was the big one.
This was the Comprehensive Act. It didn't just deal with Meghalaya. It created 3 new full states, Meghalaya, Manipur, and Tripura, and it also created 2 union territories, Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh.
And so, on January 21st, 1972...
Meghalaya Day. Meghalaya attains full-fledged statehood. The abode of clouds finally had its own place in the sun, politically speaking.
And remarkably, as we noted at the start, achieved with minimal violence, a victory of negotiation and patience.
Absolutely. And shortly after, in 1973, Assam shifted its capital to Dispur. Shillong became the exclusive capital of Meghalaya, ending that confusing dual-role period.
So, we've drawn the outer boundary of the state. But the name of our show is Drawn and Redrawn, and the internal map of Meghalaya kept changing too. I know you love to geek out on the maps. What happened to the districts once the state was formed?
Well, if you look at the map in 1951, or even at the moment of statehood in 1972, it was incredibly simple.
Yeah.
You essentially had 2 giant districts.
Just 2.
Just 2.
Yeah.
The Garo Hills and the United Khasi and Jaintia Hills.
Yeah.
2 massive blocks.
Right.
But administration requires proximity. You can't govern people effectively if the district headquarters is 3 mountain ranges away. So the internal cartography starts to evolve. The first major split happens in 1976.
What happens then?
They split the big blocks. Garo Hills becomes East Garo Hills and West Garo Hills. Yeah. The United Khasi and Jaintia Hills splits into 3. East Khasi Hills, West Khasi Hills, and a separate Jaintia Hills district.
So we go from 2 to 5. That's a significant jump in administrative density.
Exactly. Then we jump to 1992. Administration needs to get even closer to the people. So South Garo Hills is carved out of West Garo Hills. And importantly, the Reboy district is carved out of East Khasi Hills.
And why is Reboy significant?
Reboy is significant because it borders Assam and is a major gateway to the state. It has a different economic profile, much more traffic and trade. So giving it district status allows for focused administration on those border issues.
Okay, so the map is getting more and more granular.
And it continues. In 2012, we see another wave. North Garo Hills is created. Southwest Khasi Hills appears. And the Jaintia Hills district, which had been 1 block since '76, finally splits into East and West Jaintia Hills.
It seems like every decade or so, the government realizes they need to redraw the lines to serve the population better.
That's the logic. And the most recent change was just in 2021. The Eastern West Khasi Hills district was created.
Eastern West Khasi Hills, that's a bit of a tongue twister.
It is. It was carved from West Khasi Hills. So if you look at the official map today, Meghalaya has 12 districts, from 2 in 1972 to 12 today. It shows a real deepening of the administrative reach.
It really paints a picture of a living, breathing political entity. It didn't just stop evolving once it got statehood.
Not at all. The internal boundaries are just as important as the external ones because they determine how resources are distributed and how people access their government. If you have to walk 2 days to get a permit, the state feels far away. If the district headquarters is an hour away, the state is present.
So let's step back and look at this whole journey. We went from excluded areas under the British to autonomous districts in the 50s, to that wild autonomous state experiment in '69, and finally to full statehood in '72.
It is a remarkable progression. It shows that the Indian Constitution is far more flexible than people give it credit for.
It really is.
And what stands out to me is the willingness to innovate. When the standard model didn't work, they tried the Scottish pattern. When that didn't work, they invented the sub-state. They kept redrawing the constitutional box until everyone fit inside it.
Which brings us to the big so what for our listeners. Why does the story of Meghalaya matter today, outside of the Northeast?
I think it matters because we live in a world where regional identity often clashes with national identity. We see these conflicts all over the globe, and certainly elsewhere in South Asia. Meghalaya it sort of serves as a case study in how political boundaries can be redrawn through negotiation and constitutional innovation rather than just conflict.
It's a success story of federalism.
Exactly. And it raises a really provocative question for us to chew on. Could this flexible model, this idea of substates or autonomous legislative patterns, be a solution for other regions seeking autonomy today? We often think it's statehood or nothing, but Meghalaya shows us there is a vast gray area of governance in between that we rarely explore.
That is a fascinating thought. Maybe the solutions to tomorrow's border disputes are hidden in the history books of 1969.
I think they might be. The tools are there. It's just a matter of whether we have the political imagination to use them again.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through the hills and the history.
Always a pleasure to explore these maps with you.
And thank you to you, the listener, for tuning in. Check the show notes for that link to the original article if you want to see those maps we talked about. Seeing the district evolution really brings the story to life. Until next time, keep exploring.